So, I'm almost afraid to make this video because if you know anything about the Titanic and are in the Titanic community, then you'll know that Brightside makes absolutely horrible Titanic videos. And I've even seen a doctor react to some of his medical videos, and even they're inaccurate. So they make really shoddy videos. Um, and as a maritime historian, I don't want to say I'm a historian, but I'm a maritime historian. I'm gonna say goodbye to my mental health for the next week as I react to what happened to the Titanic sister ships from Brightside. And apparently I've already watched this video. Actually, no, I have watched this video. I want to react to it again on camera and see what crap they said that I don't remember. So let's get started.
Why Titanic's tragic sister ship sank.
I like how they say tragic sister ships, but the Olympic had an absolutely glorious career. Just saying.
Everyone knows the story of the Titanic, but not many people know that the Titanic had two sister ships.
Okay, the Britannic. Let me zoom in on the Britannic because I'm on my phone here. This is not a photo of the Britannic. It might look like it, but this is actually an edited photo of the Britannic because, of course, Britannic was a hospital ship, so it would have been in its hospital livery. This is an edited photo of the Britannic to make it look like it's an ocean liner. Just quickly saying.
And on the night of its sinking, one of them rushed to help, but didn't make it in time.
We're 22 seconds in. That's not actually what happened. What happened was Olympic was rushing to Titanic's position, and after a while, they did realize, okay, we're not gonna make it in time. In fact, they probably already realized that the moment they started. But Captain Haddock on Olympic, he did not give up until the Carpathia said to them, hey, we've picked up all these survivors. And Haddock knew Carpathia was a small ship, so they asked Carpathia, well, hey, do you want us to take some of those survivors or all of those survivors? Because you're a pretty small ship. We can handle a bunch more. And basically what happened was Carpathia said no. Ismay, who was on the Carpathia, said, no, don't let them do it. Or something along those lines. Don't quote me on all these, but they didn't want Olympic to pick up survivors from Carpathia because it was almost identical to the Titanic, which is fair enough.
Bad luck seemed to follow the trio of ships, but each one of them had glorious moments that live in the minds of those who sailed in them.
I can't believe they actually got something in their video right.
Keep watching to discover a story of awe, ingenuity, and ill fate. And don't forget to click the subscribe button and turn on notifications to join us on the bright side of life. You know how the Titanic hit the iceberg,
That is a really shoddy model of the Titanic. Like, they don't even have the water line. Like, I don't expect anything, amazing, I don't expect anything amazing like Titanic HG or Part-Time Explorer animations like that. I'd expect something like this, but at least put in the draft. Like, it's not that difficult to find a photo or a drawing or something of Titanic with the draft in it, because that just looks like a child did the thing. Actually, you know what I mean.
And played to the end. And
what is that sinking? What is that sinking? Titanic just went, okay, I'm gonna bump into an iceberg and just drops down like a rock. I don't remember the movie it was in, but the Ile-de-France, it was in a movie. It basically just dropped down like a rock, basically, the SS Ile-de-France.
Unfolded. But before it happened, it would have seemed impossible for such a ship to meet the end it did.
I mean, half on half, basically. It would have partly seemed impossible, but people knew it wasn't impossible, because you have liners such as, and these are big liners, by the way. These are, well, for the time, anyways, they're big liners. The Atlantic, which, okay, to be fair, Atlantic was a much smaller ship and much less safer than Titanic. I give Atlantic a bit of a pass. But then we have the Republic, which is 3 years before Titanic. Yes, I know Republic was a pretty small ship. It wasn't a very big ship, but it sank. And to be fair, to be honest though, I really shouldn't be picking on them for this, because, well, Republic sank in a day, and the only people that died are the ones in the collision. So, okay.
None of the events could have been foreseen by the White Star Line, the company who built the Titanic.
Yes and no. They had the Atlantic, they had the Neuronic, they had the Republic by that point. I'm sure they would have probably thought it might happen, but of course, what are the chances of a ship sinking on its maiden voyage? Not very high. In fact, they're probably, to be honest, one as big as the Titanic, ridiculously low.
They had high hopes for what the unsinkable ship and its sister ships, the
Titanic was never called unsinkable by the White Star Line, at least. It was called practically unsinkable because of her watertight compartments. White Star Line never said it was unsinkable, because you see in movies and documentaries and whatnot that Captain Smith said Titanic was unsinkable. Bruce Ismay said Titanic was unsinkable. Even I've seen one TV show where Andrews even said the ship was unsinkable. No. Andrews knew the ship could sink. Ismay knew the ship could sink. Smith knew the ship could sink. It was never dubbed unsinkable by the White Star Line. If I'm not mistaken, I believe it was ticket pursers that actually said it was fully unsinkable. But don't quote me on that.
Britannic and the Olympic would accomplish. The Olympic was the first of the trio to set sail on June 11th, 1911.
It's not technically that's not the route Olympic took. It's around the route Olympic took, but it's not. So Olympic departed Southampton, which is right here, and her route was to Cherbourg, which was right here, and then up to Queenstown, which was around here in Ireland, and then to New York, which was here. Not here. This is more around the Boston area, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know exactly where Boston is, to be honest with you, though, so don't quote me on that. All the ships I know about were on the Atlantic route, not the Boston route.
Heading toward New York. The sheer size of it would wow the crowds. The Olympics' maiden voyage went without incident.
Wait a minute.
And a crowd of 1911.
One quick moment. Scroll down. Its maiden voyage. Oh, you were 3 days off, bright side. 3 days off. It had its maiden voyage on the 14th of June, 1911, not the 11th. Okay, you know what? That's not a massive oversight. I'm gonna keep going. I'm really giving Brightside the benefit of the doubt in this video, and we're only 1 minute and 16 seconds in. This video is already 10 minutes long.
New York.
Oh my God.
The sheer size of it would wow the crowds. The Olympics' maiden voyage went without incident, and a crowd of 8,000 people in New York got to explore its luxurious accommodations while it was docked there.
Okay.
There were high expectations for the massive ship, but just 2 months later, the Olympic,
July, August, September, 3 months later, but again, that's not massive oversight.
crashed with HMS
I would have made that
Hawk.
mistake, to be honest.
The Hawk got the brunt of the damage.
I wouldn't also say Olympic crashed with the HMS Hawk. I would say the Hawk crashed into the Olympic, or I would say collided, actually. I wouldn't say crashed. I mean, same difference, but it's the same difference. Either way.
As the bow was left flat as a pancake.
Yeah, essentially.
After the crash, the Olympic made its way slowly back to Belfast.
They don't specify. They just say it in the picture, but they say the Hawk collided with Olympic off the coast of the U.S. No, the Hawk collided with the Olympic in the Solent River, if I'm not mistaken, and that's in England. It doesn't specify when you're safe. So if you just have your eyes closed, return to Belfast. Okay, maybe that's a little bit accurate. And I say a little bit because it returned to Southampton and then Belfast, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But still.
Where the Titanic was being constructed. On the dock, people could see the two enormous...
That is not the photo that was taken. In fact, when Hawk collided with the Olympic and Olympic was towed into Belfast for repairs, Titanic only had 3 funnels, if I'm not mistaken. They were nowhere near finishing Titanic. Well, they were near it, but not near it. They were only halfway through the fitting out process of Titanic. And this photo is actually when Olympic is put into Belfast because of a sheared propeller blade in February of 1912, and a Hawk collided with the Olympic in September of 1911. So, yeah. But to be fair, I thought this was from around that time until it made sense to me, too. So.
Ships side by side, as parts of the Titanic were used to get the Olympic back in shape.
That is actually true. I believe... Wait, is it true? I'm not sure if that's true on the Hawk collision, but I know it was true when Olympic sheared a propeller blade. I'm not saying Brightside's wrong. They could very well be right. I don't know. I just never heard of them taking parts from Titanic to repair Olympic after a collision. I knew they did it after the propeller shearing, just not the collision.
Rare sight to behold.
Correct me if I'm
On
the
April
comments
14th, 1912,
and you had that terrible
the Titanic hit an iceberg.
With the terrible
Minutes
symptom.
later, the crew radioed nearby ships for help. In shape. A rare sight to behold. On April 14th, 1912, the Titanic hit an iceberg. Minutes later, the crew radioed nearby ships for help.
When they say minutes later, I think they mean a few minutes later. In reality, Titanic hit the iceberg at 11:40 p.m., April 14th, 1912. But they didn't, if I'm not mistaken, now again, correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm not mistaken, they released their first distress call around 12:10, 12:20 a.m. on the morning of the 15th. So that's around 30-40 minutes after the collision, but still.
That night, the Olympic was returning from New York when it
Was it? Yes, it was returning from New
received
York.
the distress signal. The ship turned around and rushed at full speed toward the Titanic.
Drinking
But
pop,
they
by
were
the
so
way, if you're wondering what a noise is in the background.
far away that they would have arrived the next night. At some point during the early hours of April 15th, 1912, the crew of the Olympic decided they wouldn't make it in
Okay,
time.
first, I'd like to say that this is not the Olympic. You can tell by the promenades. This is still Titanic. And second off, as I previously stated, Olympic didn't just halt their course, said, oh no, we're not going to make it in time. They negotiated with the Carpathia, and they decided that Carpathia would take in survivors to New York. They didn't stop until they made that negotiation.
And halted their course. The survivors of the Titanic were eventually rescued by the Carpathia.
And now you put in the draft of the freaking ship.
The Olympic was set up with lifeboats for all crew and passengers after the Titanic sank. It went from having 20 lifeboats to 64.
The Olympic lifeboat thing is a bit of a mess to me, because I know in April 1912, stokers on the Olympic mutinied because of the lifeboats, of course. And wait a minute, is this supposed to be the Olympic? Wait a minute. Is that... I'm not even believing that that was supposed to be the Olympic. I'm not believing that.
Changes were also made to the water...
That's the... Bright side, you had one freaking job. One. And you failed miserably.
bulkheads, and an extra hull was installed to construct a type of double hull. It was determined that a double hull would have kept the Titanic from sinking.
That's debatable. Maybe it would, maybe it would, maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't have. But either way, I'm not an engineer, so I wouldn't know.
For several years, the Olympic was used in the war effort against Germany.
That looks like a World War II plane, to be honest with you, not a World War I plane.
Throughout the years, she carried over 200,000 passengers, including thousands
She didn't carry passengers during the war, she carried troops.
of
There's a
Americans
difference. I mean,
fleeing
there's
from
not a
Europe
difference, but there
and
is a
troops
difference.
battling during World War I.
I guess
One
technically
of the
they
most
were passengers,
significant
kind
moments
of.
for this ship was when it struck a German.
Do a semi-realistic animation for once. Please, Brightside. And actually use the right ship for once. It's not that hard.
German submarine and sank it. It was discovered that the submarine
What was that animation? What was that animation? Wait a...
from Europe and troops battling during World
What
War
was
I.
that animation?
One of the most significant moments
I
for
know
this
they have a
ship
weird
was
submarine,
when
but-
it struck a German submarine and sank it. It was discovered that the submarine
just
was preparing to
implodes.
fire a torpedo on the Olympic
Okay, that's actually kind of ironic. Just moving on.
before she rammed it. The Olympic ended up sailing the seas for 3 decades, earning her the nickname of the Old Reliable.
3 decades. It was sailing for 2.5 decades, but okay. Earning the nickname of Old Reliable? Yes.
Despite some previous accidents. It went on to help the survivors on the HMS Audacious when it was sinking, and
That is correct, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
to do what it couldn't do for its sister, the Titanic. Eventually, bad luck caught up with the Olympic. The ship crashed with the Nantucket lightship, and the crash signaled the beginning of the end.
No. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. That did not signal the beginning of the end for the Olympic. Here, you want to know what signaled the beginning of the end for the Olympic? Bigger, more massive liners coming from Germany and Italy and countries and such. More luxurious liners coming from different companies. I don't know, maybe the Great Depression hitting in 1929. Oh, the Immigration Act of 1924 limiting Olympics' own job. The Nantucket lightship collision did not signify the end of the Olympic in any way, shape, or form. The only damage done to Olympic was maybe a couple dents in the prow that could easily be fixed. Olympic was pretty much undamaged. Oh my god.
Beaten up, and after years of service, the Olympic was demolished.
Wait
Bad luck caught up with the Olympic. The ship crashed with the Nantucket lightship, and the crash signaled the beginning of the end. Beaten up, and after years of service, the Olympic was demolished and scrapped for parts.
Okay. It wasn't very beaten up. It still had a bit of life left in it, but yes, that's true, I guess.
The Old Reliable saw many years of service and thousands of passengers, but the Britannic's journey was shorter lived. When the Titanic sank, the White Star Line was faced with a problem, since they already had another enormous...
Here's the real image of Britannic I was talking about. If I save my time here, 418. If I go here, this
was the first
if I go here...
Titanic. They had high hopes for what the unsinkable ship and its sister ships, the Britannic and the Olympic...
This image is not the actual image of Britannic. In reality, it's this image that it's actually edited off of, if I'm not mistaken.
Another enormous ship in the works. The White Star Line began construction on HMHS.
Just another quick fact check. HMHS Britannic. Construction started 30th November 1911. Good job, Brightside. You got something right in your life.
Britannic on November 30th, 1911, around 4 months before the Titanic sank. Although the Britannic was the youngest of the trio of ships, having been constructed last, it was also the biggest.
Perspective. It wasn't the longest or the tallest or anything like that. They were the same size. It was tonnage it was bigger in. And that's because ships are measured in tonnage. Tonnage doesn't mean how heavy a ship is or how big a ship is. It's actually measured by volume inside the ship. The only reason Titanic was actually bigger than the Olympic was because it had cabins installed in B deck, which increased the volume of the ship. Olympic only had a promenade there until 1913. That's why Titanic was bigger than Olympic. Otherwise, they would have been the same size. Or around the same size. Probably not exactly the same size, but around the same size.
Gigantic. However,
No! There is evidence suggesting that Britannic was never meant to be named gigantic. It has basically been disproven in the Titanic community. Now, me personally, I don't exactly know the evidence around it. But I do know that I don't think White Star Line would have named a ship gigantic. And personally, the theory just sounds so fake, to be honest with you. I know that credit from me is just, trust me, bro. But I believe there is, from me, that is just, trust me, bro. But I believe there is evidence to state that gigantic was never supposed to be. It was always supposed to be Britannic. Of course, if there's actual evidence saying so otherwise in the comments, please let me know. Because I do get things wrong. I'm not perfect. Neither is Brightside. But Brightside, let's be honest, doesn't even try in his videos. At least I try in my videos.
after the Titanic's disaster, they changed the name to the Britannic, since they considered it to be a lucky name.
They might have considered it to be a lucky... Please don't tell me they're going to show the MV Britannic.
With the Titanic's...
Okay, I'll explain what's wrong with this image in a minute. Oh, what was I talking about? I have to go back for a sec.
The biggest.
I forget.
They intended to name it Gigantic.
Oh yeah, lucky name. They actually named a ship Britannic in 1874, and it had a pretty lucky career. But then that's just the equivalent of them naming a ship the... Oh, what's the name that they didn't reuse? I don't want to say Atlantic. They definitely not the Atlantic. Germanic. It would have been essentially the same thing as naming it Germanic. Lucky name. Germanic had a pretty good career. In fact, when Britannic was built and sank, Germanic was still around. Germanic wasn't scrapped until 1950. And no, I didn't say 15. 50, which is a massive runtime for a ship, especially one built in 1875.
However, after the Titanic's disaster, they changed the name to the Britannic, since they considered it to be a lucky name. With the Titanic sinking,
By the way, this isn't the Britannic. White Star Line had 3 ships called Britannic. One in 1874 was a small, big for the time, but in reality by this time, small, 4-masted, 2-tall funnel liner. The second Britannic was, of course, the one you always see in videos, Titanic sister. This was the third Britannic, and it was the second last ship built for the White Star Line before the merger with Cunard. They did actually have 3 different ships named Britannic. And this was the third one. The one that you see in videos with the Titanic and such. Titanic's sister ship, it was the second Britannic.
Star Line underwent rigorous investigations, and many changes were made to the Britannic's design. She looked very similar to the Titanic, and had the largest marine turbine in the world at the time.
Actually, at the time, I'm fairly certain that record is still unbeaten. If I'm not mistaken, it could be beaten, and I just don't know. I'm fairly certain, though, that's never been beaten.
Reach faster speed.
Unless I'm thinking of something else that's never been beaten on Britannic, and they got this wrong, in which case, once again, correct me in the comments.
Than the Olympic. With the Titanic's fate fresh in their minds, everything possible was done to ensure the safety of this newer ship. The Britannic was eventually launched on February 26, 1914.
Yep, correct.
Almost 2 years after the Titanic met her end.
Yeah.
After the Titanic's disaster, the White Star Line wanted the Britannic to redeem their name.
Again, this is not the Britannic. This is still the Titanic.
She was on her way to becoming a successful ship and transported passengers for over a year and a half.
Huh? Transported passengers for over a year and a half. No, she didn't. She was never completed as a passenger vessel. I'm trying to think. Why? They think that launching a ship is the same as its maiden voyage. No, when Britannic was launched, it was an empty shell with no funnels. It didn't have its maiden voyage until December 1915, and that was as a hospital ship. So it never had a maiden voyage, to be honest with you. It never had a commercial maiden voyage. So that's just... at least try, right?
When the British government requisitioned her and turned her into a hospital ship at the beginning of World War I.
Again, that was during construction. That wasn't after Britannic had her maiden voyage. During construction, it was when Britannic was called into service.
The ship became an even more impressive sight to look at. It was painted all white with
That seems like an opinion to me.
huge red crosses on its side.
Also, this is just the most shoddy animation ever. I take it back. What is this? Like, what is this? Like, jeez.
That it was a hospital ship. One of the ship's surgeons, Dr. J.C.H. Beaumont, thought of it as the most wonderful hospital ship that ever sailed the seas.
Okay.
It could treat as many as 3,300.
I'm not saying it's true. I'm just saying I believe it.
109 patients at once. This is Dr. J.C.H. Beaumont.
Did they just say it could hold 209 patients?
Most wonderful hospital ship that ever sailed the seas. It could treat as many as 3,309 patients.
Oh, 3,309. Okay, yeah, I believe that is the accurate number. That is the amount Britannic was safely allowed to carry, I believe.
This is how the Britannic became His Majesty's Hospital Ship, or HMHS Britannic.
They actually got the prefix right.
Though the sight of this magnificent ship must have put a smile on a wounded soldier's face, the Britannic didn't operate for long. Just a year after it was turned into a hospital ship.
Use the actual photo for one. And what happened to the mast? What happened to the ship's main mast? Like, dude, use the correct model for once and don't use a shoddy animation.
The Britannic was making its way through the Aegean Sea to pick up wounded soldiers when it was struck by a loud explosion.
Struck by a loud explosion. Struck by a loud explosion. That's what I'm gonna say from now on. Oh yes, Britannic was sailing on the 21st of November, 1916, and it struck a loud explosion. That's what I'm gonna say from now on.
The passengers didn't know what had happened.
It wasn't carrying passengers. It wasn't carrying passengers. It wasn't even carrying patients. It was carrying nurses and staff.
But headed to the deck to disembark.
I think my cat's wondering why I'm putting myself through mental torture. I hear her meowing outside my door.
It's unclear what hit the Britannic, but the consensus is that it was struck by a mine left by a German U-boat.
There's evidence to support that it was struck by a mine. We know what happened to her. She was struck by a mine.
Though some still believe a torpedo hit it.
That is true. Some still believe a torpedo hit it. Some just believe it because conspiracies. Some believe it because they didn't know. Yeah, I'm not willing to make an argument with everybody saying, no, you're wrong. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying people do believe that it was struck by a torpedo. Even I believe that it was struck by a torpedo once when I was getting into maritime history about 7 years ago.
The captain tried to move the ship to a nearby beach.
That's not the nearby beach it was trying to get to. And what's happening to the draft? It's just gone again. Like, jeez.
But the ship was sinking fast. In desperation, and against the captain's orders, several crew members launched lifeboats and disembarked.
Yeah.
Sadly, since the ship was moving and the propellers working, the
Oh.
lifeboats were sucked in and destroyed by the propellers.
Not all of them. So, in the first few minutes after the mine explosion and Bartlett trying to beach the ship, I believe 5 lifeboats started to be launched. One of those lifeboats, halfway through launching, the person who was controlling the gantry davits just thought to himself, wait a minute, no, Captain did not give me orders to lower this lifeboat. I will stop lowering this lifeboat. And, well, when he did, the people inside the lifeboat started cursing at him really harshly. Here's to say they stopped cursing when they saw 2 other lifeboats get sucked into the propellers, and I think the other 2, if I'm not mistaken, the other 2, well, the first one of the other 2, was almost sucked in by the propellers, but wasn't, and the other one of the other 2, I don't want to say first one, I guess, one of them, I believe, was almost sucked into the propellers, but wasn't, and the other one was sucked into the propellers, but by that point Bartlett had been what's the word I'm looking for? Bartlett had been why can't I speak? Bartlett had been notified. That's the word. Bartlett had been notified of what was going on, and he immediately ordered all stop. So those propellers stopped like the second they were about to. They were stopping like the minute that lifeboat was launched, which was really lucky.
Though so much effort had gone into ensuring the Britannic was safer than the Titanic, whatever explosion occurred left the Britannic in the same dire condition as the Titanic in just 10 minutes.
That is actually true. In 1 hour of the Titanic sinking, her hull... I'm not saying the water inside was up to that point, but outside, her hull was maybe up to E or D deck. But in 5 minutes, 5 to 10, maybe 15 at the most minutes of Britannic sinking, I want to say 10 minutes, it was up to that point. So yes.
In a cruel twist of fate, it also sank in the ocean. Unlike the Titanic's large death toll, only 30 people perished in the sinking of the Britannic.
That's true.
Over 1,000 survived. So many people survived because the accident happened in the morning when the temperature of the water was warmer.
And because they actually had lifeboats. And because they weren't 400 miles away from land.
In addition, the Greek island of Kea was near enough to offer
Exactly.
help. In the end, the Britannic only sailed the seas for about 2.
No, it didn't. It sailed for 11 months. It didn't even sail for 11 months. It sailed for 10 months and about 28 days, I think. Maybe 29, something around there. Oh. You know, I was starting to think maybe the rest of this video is accurate. Nope, they had to put in that one inaccurate fact that just screws me over. Britannic was never an operated passenger liner. Never.
2.5 years. The bad luck that followed the Titanic and the Britannic, and the accidents and demise of the Olympic were remarkable. But what was most impressive is that there was a woman who sailed on all 3
Jessup.
ships and survived. Violet Jessup was a crew member and nurse aboard the ships.
Yes, Violet Jessup. Violet Jessup was, I believe, a stewardess on Olympic and Titanic and a nurse on Britannic.
She was there when the Olympic collided with HMS Hawke in 1911.
Correct.
And disembarked
Please
safely.
be rest correct,
2 years
please.
later, she escaped the sinking of the Titanic in...
What lifeboat was Violet Jessup in on the Titanic? Lifeboat 16. It's accurate so far, please. For my own sanity, have the rest of the video
Lifeboat
be
number
accurate.
16. And she showed some women that it was safe to board the lifeboats. You'd imagine that would have been enough to keep her from ever getting on a boat
Please,
again.
be accurate.
But not for her.
This video is 9 minutes long, and the video I'm recording is 35 minutes long.
A few years later, she served as a nurse on the Britannic while it was used as a hospital ship.
Yes.
When the explosion occurred,
Yes.
Violet jumped overboard and was pulled.
No, she didn't. Oh. She was in one of the lifeboats that were brought into the moving propellers. She jumped overboard off that lifeboat. I believe a piece of the lifeboat hit her head and she got a really bad bruise or a skull fracture or something like that, but she survived. She didn't jump overboard on the freaking ship. That would have definitely almost certainly killed her, especially since she didn't know how to swim. For her, it was pure luck that she came up to the surface after she jumped overboard off that lifeboat. But she didn't jump off that giant ship.
Under by the water and hit her head on the.
I don't think anybody, I don't think it doesn't matter how drunk or stupid you are. I don't think you would jump overboard in that situation. Actually, okay. Would you? No, probably not. To be honest with you, probably not.
But she survived.
Especially since the hull was 4 or 5 stories tall.
Can you imagine her experience? She must have had nerves of steel. Now,
you also forgot to mention that now, that wasn't the end of Jessup's career. She continued sailing as a stewardess and nurse for the rest of the war, I believe. Nurse, and then after that, stewardess. She was on the Belgian land when it was on 2 world cruises in the 1920s, and she was on some other ships that I can't quite remember.
Nowadays, the trolls of the internet would probably have instead called Violet a jinx.
So would you, to be honest. Don't even pretend like you wouldn't, Brightside.
Because of her being on board all 3 ships when they had their darkest moments. All in all, the trio of ships saw journeys of triumph and tragedy. Ill fate may have followed them, but all the survivors were left with incredible stories to tell.
What more can you get inaccurate in 30 seconds? Please.
So, Brightsiders, tell us, would you have liked to see any of these ships in real life? Let us know in the comments section. Don't forget to give this video a like, share it with your friends.
No. No. No, I will not give this video a like. Look, I've already disliked the video. You know what? I'll dislike it again. Okay. I'm gonna go back. And I'm just gonna say, if you want me to go through any more mental torture of this, you can say goodbye to that thought for the next at least couple months. Unless I'm bored and I have nothing to do on YouTube again. In which case, then I will come back and give you an early Christmas gift. Brightside's channel link will be in the description below. The video is titled, What Happened to the Titanic's Sister Ships? There's no point in putting a link in the video to the video because the video links don't work on the video anymore. How many times can I say video link in a video? Apparently a lot. Half of that wasn't even intentional. Alright. I just want to say, I hope you enjoyed this video. And, Wilhelm Gustloff tutorial, if I uploaded this before it, is hopefully coming soon. Just saying. Goodbye.